This is CHSR 97.9 FM here in Fredericton, New Brunswick, Canada, and you're listening to Python's Paradise, your film and music show. This is your host, Greg Gilbert, and I've got a wonderful guest today for all you fans of Mean Girls out there. I love that movie, one of the best teen flicks since the millennium. And I have on the phone the lovely Julia Chantrey on the phone. Hello, Julia.
What's up?
And of course, we know you as the girl who, quote unquote, made it with the hot dog in the movie. I suppose you get a lot of wiener jokes since that movie, huh?
I get a lot of "it was one time."
Yeah?
The quote, "it was one time."
Are you popular at cookouts?
I try to avoid those.
Well, how did you get the part for Mean Girls? Did you just go to a standard audition?
Yeah, I had been working in Toronto for a while, and I was actually working at Tim Hortons, which is you guys must have it there.
Oh, yeah.
Hortons. Okay. My sister and I were both working there, and I was working the overnight shift, the 11 p.m. to 7 a.m., so I was sleeping during the day and working at this horrible job at night. And the audition came in, and when you initially get the audition, you don't really know anything about it. It's just a few pages of dialogue, and there was something about masturbation and a hot dog. And because I was working at night and sleeping during the day, any auditions that I did, I had to drag myself out of bed. It was like in the middle of the night for me to get up and go audition during the day. So initially I didn't want to do it. I didn't know what the deal was with the masturbation. I'm very glad that I went in to read for it. Initially I read for Janice, which is another character in the movie, and she was likely already cast, but they get you to read for a character that has more lines just to get a feel of you. And so I read for her and then didn't hear anything, and then got called back to read for Amber, the hot dog girl. And the director was in there. It was again the middle of the night for me because I was still working this job. And then I booked it, and I still remember standing outside of Tim Hortons at like 10:30 at night about to go into work, and then getting the full script and pulling it out of this envelope and seeing Tina Fey's name on the cover and being like, oh, shit, thank God I took this job. I had no idea she had anything to do with it until after I'd been cast. So that's how it worked out.
Wow. And you know what? You're like a standout. And you mentioned Tim Hortons and dragging yourself out of bed. It kind of goes with that line where they were surveying the cafeteria, and when you appear on screen playing with your food, they say burnout.
Yeah. Well, that is, if you're an actor and you're working multiple jobs trying to make it to auditions and do what you really want to do, you usually are exhausted at some point.
Yeah. I was looking for somebody I've done several cult film interviews, and I come by Mean Girls, and I was like, I wonder who I could get from that. And when I did not know you by name, but when I discovered a list of pictures of people and I saw the picture of you from the movie, I was like, does she have contact information? And I was so thrilled when I had you. It's like, I don't even think I could have done even better if I had Lindsay Lohan. It was like you're the hot dog girl. It's like everybody will definitely want to hear you, you know?
Yeah.
Yeah. So how long did it take you to shoot your scenes?
Actually, that was a really long shoot considering I didn't have an excessive amount of coverage, but they shot that movie for about 3 months, which is long for it. That was a higher profile movie, so they had a lot of money, and the shooting went on for longer than it would be normal. So I was there for about 10 days over a 3-month period. They shot at a variety of high schools in Toronto, which is where I'm from. And so we would go in and shoot some coverage in a cafeteria in one school, and then on a different day we'd be at a different school shooting the exterior coverage, and I was on and off for about 10 days.
So technically speaking, and I know I heard this even in the commentary track for the movie, technically speaking, Mean Girls is a Canadian film, you might say, huh?
Well, it's definitely an American film. They shoot in Canada because we offer a tax credit, so it's an incentive to U.S. productions to shoot here because they can write off a lot of expenses, including the Canadian talent that they cast. So it's the majority of the stuff that I work on, even if I'm shooting it here, is U.S. Because the fact that it's shot here doesn't make it a Canadian production. It's who's paying for it, and it's definitely coming from the U.S., but they will cast the main characters in the States. So Lindsay and additional characters, they were all American, and then they move the production to where they're going to shoot, and they start casting the supporting characters. Although the film is loaded with Canadian talent because it did shoot here. Rachel is Canadian, the girl who plays Regina George.
Yeah.
I suspect she was already in the U.S. by that point. It's custom. We will go to the U.S. and then you start booking more jobs and you end up back here to shoot them. But it's definitely an American film.
Wow. So, do many people recognize you from being in the movie?
Surprisingly, yes. I'm always a little surprised that few second of coverage is recognizable enough to see me 15 years later on the street and recognize me. But yeah, it happens every once in a while.
Well, I'm going to say, like, I personally found you very attractive in the movie, but when I saw some of your pictures online, like, you know, I don't want to sound forward, but you're a very, very attractive, very beautiful woman.
Thank you.
You're welcome. So, what was it like working with Lindsay Lohan?
I really didn't see her very much. I didn't have very much interaction with her at all. It was a huge cast, and just because you're all in the same film doesn't mean that you're all together. They shoot a lot of different coverage with different people. So I met her very briefly at the craft services table, which is where they keep all the food between meals. There's constant food on a set. You're there for about 16 hours a day. And I met her. We introduced ourselves, and she seemed very pleasant. But that was the extent of my interaction with her. I didn't meet Tina either. I was around her, but we didn't have any scenes that were directly involving each other. I did have a scene between her and I that actually my coverage got cut because they could not. I had to go into ADR, which is you shoot the movie and you're reading certain dialogue, and then if it doesn't come out, if it's unclear, if there was a lot of background noise and they need it re-recorded, they pull you into ADR and you go into a recording studio and re-record the lines. And the scene where the burn book has come out, the hallway is flooded, and then everybody's in the auditorium and she's giving the lecture on how they should behave. Her and I had an exchange back and forth. I was sitting on the bleachers and her and I had dialogue back and forth. But I from what I can remember, it was a long time ago, but I think the line contained the word masturbate, and they couldn't use that word and get a PG-13 rating, so they had to change the word, and they kept bringing me in to ADR. I think it was at least twice. It might have even been 3 times. And Mark, the director, was back in the U.S. at that point, so he was telecast into the session, and I'm in Toronto, and they're trying to get a word that I can lip sync to try to cover it so they can use the coverage and not have the word masturbate. And they tried a bunch of different words, but nothing matched the lips of the shot, and so they had to take it out. So that coverage between her and I isn't even in the film, and that was the extent of my relationship with Tina Fey. But I'm a big fan of hers, and I enjoyed just being on anything that she was behind.
You know, it's interesting. They flare up over the word like masturbate, and you know, yeah, I find that a little ridiculous, especially since I'm pretty sure everybody that watches it knows what it is anyway.
I mean, I was surprised that they weren't aware before that it was even in the script and that it wasn't anticipated that it wouldn't qualify. But I mean, they know more than I do about securing certain ratings. I don't know what the reason was behind removing it and why it was initially in the script, but I think it was such a hugely successful film, and it is it's something that's appreciated by both teenage girls as well as men and women in their 30s. It's a strong comedic film, so they were probably interested in having as many people be able to see it as possible, and that's when you have to start negotiating with language.
Well, it's a film that, strangely enough, being about girls, it was a film I related to very, very much, you know. Yeah, I kind of lived some of that movie, and I've had movies, of course, set in high schools that I've related to before. I had somebody on here from the movie Class of 1984, which is a 1982 flick, and I related to that well, too. Well, Mean Girls, of course, is a softer touch than that, but I certainly related to some of the issues that Catty Herring, played by Lindsay Lohan, was dealing with. And I think I went and saw the film must have been about three or four times I saw that when it was at theaters. I enjoyed it that much.
Yeah, I think that's why it's continued to do so well and be so well known. I think it's been 13 years later. It's because it's the content and it is so easily identifiable to it's the dynamics of any social circle, regardless of whether it's a high school or whether it's an environment that you associate with being older. I think those dynamics and power struggles and the self-doubt regarding your own identity and how you compromise yourself to be seen in a certain way. I think those things are so ingrained in us that it allows, and then of course it's hilarious. The writing's fantastic. So it's something that resonates with people regardless of their age, which is fantastic if you're looking for widespread appeal.
Yeah, and that was when, of course, Lindsay Lohan was at the top of her game, and I still say this is one of the best things she's done. I hope she gets her act together because I think she's very talented, and I think she's got a lot to offer, so I hope she can get herself straightened out before it's too late.
I have no experience with being in her position. I think I don't know her personally, and I wouldn't be able to go off the press to comment on what she is or is not going through. But I would love to see her in the position that she was in terms of the quality of work that she was doing 10 years ago. I would be the first person to be behind her in a comeback. I think there's a lot more that goes on behind the scenes than what is presented, and I empathize with being in the position that she was in, where everything that she was going through was being critiqued by people who didn't know her and were not in their position. So I wish her nothing but the best.
You mentioned earlier Rachel McAdams. Now, she was just up for some awards for Spotlight. It's talk about it. The first time I ever remember seeing her was playing Regina George, and I gotta say, she can transcend to any genre. I mean, she's a fantastic performer. What was she like, or did you work with her any?
I didn't know. I had just as minimal minimal coverage with her as I did with anybody else. But I remember having the impression of her. I was really impressed with her work ethic, with the way that she carried herself. I ran into her in the makeup trailer one day, and then I also was on set, and I just remember looking over at her and seeing her. She's very open and approachable. She certainly wasn't standoffish, but I could see that she was very self-contained. She was very focused on the work that she was doing, and I just remember looking over and seeing her with a travel book. I don't know if it was Costa Rica or where it was, but I think her and I may have had an exchange about it. She was planning a trip, and she was educating herself on the environment, getting ready to go on vacation when the film had finished. I'm pretty sure that was what we discussed, and I just remember getting a sense of the way that she had the level of commitment to be at work and to be available, and the way that she was attentive to what was going on around her. But I also could see that she had her own life, she had her own objectives, and that her professional behavior in the workplace, and also getting a glimpse of how much bigger her world was outside of just this particular shoot. So I had a lot of respect for her back then, and I've seen a lot of her work since then. I just saw Spotlight for the second time a couple of days ago.
Yeah,
and I'm interested in the content that she works within. She does go back and forth into different genres.
Yes, and then of course Lacey Chabert with that new word, fetch. She was fetch.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. I don't know her, and I didn't meet her, but I had watched Party of Five when I was younger, and I had never seen her do comedy. I thought it was great.
Yeah, and then Amanda Seyfried. She's another one too, like Rachel McAdams. I never expected her to go from playing the typical dumb blonde to playing some of the more mature roles that she does today. Even like Mamma Mia in a musical. Like, she's another one that's really transcend well.
Mhm. Well, I remember her. I guess we had random conversations. We would just run into each other, I guess, over the course of the time I was there. I remember her and how smart she was. I remember her referencing Mark having spoken to her, the director having spoken to her, and made the comment that you want to cast smart people in dumb roles. You would never want to cast a dumb person in a dumb role. They have to be highly intelligent to be able to work with the material and make it funny. And similar to Rachel's casting, that you want to cast very likable people in very disliked roles. You want to kind of go opposite to the personality trait. And I remember her. I think her timing is just hilarious, and she's not only very intelligent, but she was very aware of how she was working the material and the way that she would position herself in that group. And I just remember her talking about, because she's so gorgeous, and I remember her talking about her skin. She's very pale, and I just remember her making some reference to having been called Casper and made fun of by, I assume, children when she was younger. And I remember thinking of how ironic it is that such gorgeous people who do so phenomenally well later in life often were critiqued when they were younger, often critiqued about the things that later are, their sources of strength and success. So I liked her as well.
I love that scene where she almost sticks her whole hand in her mouth, or fist in her mouth.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
That was almost. I'd say she almost had that thing in there.
Yeah. I like the one where she is bragging that she can tell when it's going to rain, and then she amends it and says, "Well, I can tell when it's raining."
Yeah,
Hilarious.
that's a great line. I'm trying to think who played Janice. I know she was in
Lizzie Kaplan.
Lizzie
played Janet.
Kaplan. Yeah, she was just in The Night Before with Seth Rogen.
Mm-hmm.
Another interesting a character actor and
Mm-hmm.
quite stunning. You know, you see her in there;
Yeah.
she's all gothed up. A very good-looking woman.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. I thought she was funny. I thought her and Daniel Franchese, who played Damien, I thought they were hilarious.
Yeah, I love that comment when he's in the bathroom and the girl's upset and she goes, "Oh, Danny DeVito, I love your work."
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Yeah, the writing was great.
And Jonathan Bennett, of course, playing the guy caught between the girls.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. I didn't meet him at all. I didn't meet him at all, but I saw him later on in the coverage. I don't know what else he's been in. I don't think I've ever seen him again since then.
Well, it's interesting because last year I went and I saw Sisters. I saw that 3 times in the theater. And of course, Amy Poehler and Tina Fey, they don't have any scenes together in Mean Girls, but it's interesting that they've managed to remain constant together in the movies ever since then. And
Mm-hmm.
yeah, a great pairing. And they're both really good in this movie.
Yeah, she's hilarious. I remember Amy in the makeup trailer at like very early in the morning, and she was sitting there doing a crossword, yelling out, what's a 4-letter word for this? And everybody in there was half asleep, and everybody trying to assist her with the crossword, and she was just so alert and perky and determined to get these answers regardless of the fact that it was like the middle of the night.
I heard that they put some kind of meat in her outfit there when the dog chews on her nipple.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah,
I don't know. I wasn't around for that shot, but I wouldn't be surprised.
I think it was said in the commentary track. Tina Fey and Mark Waters. This, I think, is probably the best film I've seen out of Mark Waters too.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, absolutely the best I've seen out of him. And
Mm-hmm.
yeah, so
So I'm gonna have to go. I have another thing booked for 5 minutes from now.
okay. Well, is there any possibility I could get your autograph, an autograph picture of you?
Yeah, of course. I can send it over if you send your mailing information to Jane.
Well, I want to send a special shout out to Jane Forbes for hooking this up.
Mm-hmm.
Yep. Yeah. And no, I really appreciate you taking the time to come on here. I loved you as the girl that made out with the hot dog, Amber. You stood out to me, and I was so happy to make this connection and be able to talk to you today.
It's really nice to meet you too. Thank you for having me.
It was very nice. And when this is done, I will send it. Maybe I'll send it to Jane, and you can put it on your website. Put it on the link wherever you want to put it.
Yeah, absolutely.
Okay.
Nice to meet you. Take care.
Yes. God bless.
Take care. Bye-bye.
Yep. Bye.